Okay, before we begin, let us examine what we know. Let us talk about what we know we talk about. Okay? Just so we can get it straight. Nice, got you all tight so you can really see it. So, according to the books and stuff, according to what I'm gathering from it, everything has a final cause. What the hell does that mean? Everything does something. Everything happens. Everything just goes around and just, it is. Trees grow, sun does this, there's wind, the water does, everything does something. And final cause. And as human beings, we seek to know what that means. So we look for, what is know? And so they analyze from what that understanding is from when you're young to how you gather your senses about the world around you. And you say, what is the world? And how do I use the parts of my body, the muscles within my neck? And how do I learn how to grab things and walk and run and all that stuff? And it comes to that idea of like, what is that knowingness? So from that point we have phenomena, which is what that kind of, everything has a final cause thinking. Phenomena equals things as they seem through all of our senses. So everything around us is a phenomenon that we can gather through our senses. And there are two major factors in which we discern people that gather the information of what phenomena is. Spontaneous and reflective. Reflective is the truth as they are rendered by man. Spontaneous is without that truth. It's just people living their lives as they live them. Most people, they don't seem to think about these things. They're considered spontaneous people. Reflective people seek to learn why things do what they do. Well, from that point, we have to start thinking about a system, don't we? If we're all going to sit down and say, what is this? What is that? What is this? What is that? We all have to start agreeing with certain ideas, and from that point, you begin to see it grow. Once we start exploring it a little more, you'll see like from Plato going on, and blah, 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 Bacon, blah, 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 and then this guy, all these names will start to happen. We're kind of agreeing with that through the system and beginning to grow together. Now, principles and causes is what the system seeks to ascertain. Okay? Step over this way. Realities, what they appear. So from that point within the systems, we seek to understand what realities are. Things as they seem. And from that point, we start to understand what philosophy is. Because we're seeking what the reality of this world is because we understand there's things out of our control. Now, philosophy seeks for the truth through the void of lies. And investigate nature non-human. So it's investigating everything that happens within the world, within the sciences, that is not human being. The human aspect of understanding this is just the way we gather this information. The way we analyze it and how we ascertain the truths that we're seeking. But we have this thing called subjectivity. It's a state analysis. So like independent analysis within our own heads. I look at the world this way, but you look at it that way, and you look at it this way. From that point, we have to learn how to discern reality from lies. Lies easily are just errors. We thought that this was it, it's wrong, that's a lie now. Reality, what is real, that's what they're discerning. You can't really define what is real, because as the one guy put, the author of this book, is there even such thing as absolute truth? That, once found, the realities, the realnesses of why everything happens, creates the foundation. From that foundation is where we begin with the idea of what philosophy is, which is created through our experiences, which are isolated perspectives. And then from that point, as we understand it, things start to grow. Like discerning what life is, what life isn't, why this, why that. Through the system theories and through discerning, only certain minds can do this kind of stuff. And we together will agree, here's the point from when we started, this is where we're seeking to go. But then the problem is, what is faith and its purpose? How does that have anything to do with anything? What is God? Is God reality? Is it real? Is it not? In a short synopsis, that's what we've discussed so far. Let's get back into it and see what we have next. Here we go. Now, everything I just said, bearing that in mind. These reflections led us to the consideration of another objection that has often been raised, more especially against the practical utility of speculative philosophy, namely, that even supposing it to be a real and genuine branch of human knowledge, yet it can only find place in a very few minds, and must ever be completely unintelligible to the mass. This, therefore, is presented as insuperable barrier against its ever becoming of any extensive advantage, or indeed of its having any kind of influence upon mankind at large. This is an ordinary plea of, okay, so it's basically just saying, like, this is just kind of the idea of utilitarianism and stuff like that. Such an objection, we reply, if insisted on, would prove fatal to cause of almost every branch of human science. It is never expected, and indeed it is not possible, that the mass of mankind should be acquainted with the process by which any kind of investigation, whatever, is carried on. The search after truth, even the truths of the phenomenal world, is a process to them completely enveloped in darkness. All they have to do is reap the practical fruits of any discovery when it is made. Is that not true or what? Without casting one single thought upon the steps by which others have arrived at it. If we look for a moment at the law by which thought is propagated, we find it always descends from the highest order of thinkers to those who are only degree below them. For these, again, it descends another degree, losing at each step of the descent sometimes more of the scientific form, until it reaches the mass in a shape of some admitted fact of which they feel there is not a shadow of doubt. A fact which rests on the authority of what all the world above them says, and which, therefore, they receive total regardlessness of the method of its elimination. Take, for example, any great fact or law of nature, ascertained by means of physical science. Such a fact is, first of all, perchance, wrung from the most close and laborious mathematical analysis. A few, perhaps, may take the trouble to follow every step of this progress, but the mass, even of natural philosophers themselves, are content to see what is the method of investigation, to copy the formulas in which it results, and then put it down as so much further ascension to their physical science. Just saying, like, and then they thought of this, and that's that. Anyway, the mass of intelligence, educated minds, again, with a general idea only of mathematical analysis, accept the fact of or law we are now supposing as one of the many beautiful results of investigations, which they acknowledge to be far beyond the reach of their own powers. And from them, lastly, it descends to the rest of the community as a bare fact, which they appropriate to their own use, simply as being a universally acknowledged truth. The first schoolboy you meet would very likely tell you with some accuracy what is the rapidity of light. But as to any of the observations of the oscillations of Jupiter's satellites, or on the phenomena of aberration, or any such other method of computing it, on these he has never bestowed a thought. The commonest seaman that has learned the use of a sextant applies it to his own purposes, all the necessary formulas of trigonometry. But as to the method of investigating such formulas, such matters lie entirely out of his reach. This law of the descent of thought, however, this gravitation of ascertained truth from the higher order of minds to the lower, is not confined to the mathematical sciences, nor is it here alone that the results of investigation are transmitted by what may be termed formulas. There are such things as historical formulas, as formulas for the various theories of fine arts, and so also are there philosophical or metaphysical formulas, the result of long and patient reflection. In this last case particularly, embody themselves in some general principle. And this principle, after it has been tested, gradually spreads itself downward from the mind to mind, until thousands act upon it every day of their own life, to whom all philosophical thinking is completely foreign. When therefore the objection is raised that metaphysical inquiries lie beyond the reach of mass, and cannot practically subserve the general interest of mankind, it is entirely forgotten or overlooked that the results of such inquiries are intelligible to all, nay, that they are amongst the most practical, efficient, and influential of all truths, which can possibly exist in the mind of man. This assertion is fully borne out by much that we meet with in the intellectual history of the past. How few could there have been amongst the multitude of mankind who, in the Middle Ages, ever read a page of Aristotle? And did Aristotle therefore exercise but little influence upon them? Far from it. The minds of those who did think deeply were completely molded by his philosophy. These again governed the reflections of those immediately beneath them, and from them the results of Aristotelism, mingling up as they did especially with the religious opinion of the day, reached the whole of the popular intellect. Look again at the sensationalistic philosophy of France during the last century. The people at large, it is true, neither read Locke, from whose writings that philosophically professedly, though not justly emanated, neither did they study the new edition of his principles as published and distorted by Condillac, nor did they understand the process by which Cabanis and the others developed the system to its farthest consequences. But they had no difficulty in laying hold of what we may term the formulas of that philosophy, formulas which came before them in a very intelligible proposition, declarative of complete materialism, together with an implied denial both of the doctrines of man's immortality and the existence of a God. We strongly inclined, indeed, to think that the result of intellectual philosophy, really speaking, influenced the mass of mankind practically more than those of any other department of knowledge whatever, inasmuch as they bear most closely upon the very principles of all human action, elevate or depress the general feeling as to the worth and sanctity of virtue, and give a coloring to the popular religiosum of the age. All this assuredly should remind us that these results ought neither to be looked upon with indifference or contempt, nor be framed but upon the most patient and extensive investigation. That one was a fucking slut to read.